African time. But interestingly, it appeared that our guests did not even engage in African time, and you guys arrived early. I think we all deserve a round of applause for that, and we should love ourselves for coming early. I think Kabir is my name. I work with GGA to Governance Africa as a senior researcher, and also work as the planning, evaluation, monitoring, and reporting person here. So basically, we would not want to waste our time. Permit me to apologize that my ED, Dr. Olabelo, is not around. He's unavailably absent. For a sense of goodwill, and he has instructed me that today that I should give a powerful welcome address on his behalf with respect to what we are doing today. Good morning again, distinguished guests, representatives of governments, the diplomatic corps present here, members of civil society, the media, and all those who are joining us physically and virtually, as you're aware that the event is an hybrid one. It is my honor to welcome everyone to this timely and vital conversation. Today's event marks the launch of our latest research reports titled Unseen Advances, Quiet Competencies, ISWAP Strategic Resurgence, and the Limit of Nigeria's Military Response, and also conveying a strategic dialogue to unpack its findings and implications. As many of us are aware, the Islamic State of West African Province, ISWAP, has not only endured, it has adapted, expanded, and reasserted itself as the Islamic State's most formidable affiliates. Our analysis confirms that ISWAP alone accounts for over a third of ISIS global attacks and nearly 30% of its global casualty figures in the first half of 2025 alone. These are not abstract numbers. They represent real consequences for the community across Lake Chad Basin and beyond. ISWAP resurgence is a sobering reminder that conventional military responses alone are no longer sufficient. It has embedded itself through systems of taxation, governance, local accommodation. Indeed, this calls for a smarter strategy, one that prioritizes intelligence, disrupts financing and logistics, strengthens local resilience, and places communities at the center of our security architecture. Our report, expertly done by my colleague and the lead conflict researcher at GGA, Malik Samwe, brings fresh evidence and perspective to bear on how ISWAP sustains its operation and how limits our current state response. To deepen this conversation, we are privileged to have with us two panelists with deep knowledge of both policy and field. One, Honorable Ali Ibrahim Gebni, the Special Advisor to Nigerian Chief of Defense Staff on non-kinetic strategies. We also have our brother, Mustafa Al-Hassan, an accomplished peacebuilding researcher in the Lake Chad Basin and Sahel. We believe that their insights will be invaluable in shaping our understanding of how Nigeria and the broader region can move beyond conventional military responses to adopt a more holistic and sustainable security architecture in addressing the ISWAP threats. As you engage with us today, I encourage everyone to reflect on how we can collectively rethink and recalibrate Nigeria's response to insurgency. One that is proactive, locally grounded, and regionally coordinated. This event reflects GGA's Nigerian commitment to advancing security sector reform through evidence-based research, strategic dialogue, and stakeholder engagement. Thank you once again for being here, and we look forward to a meaningful dialogue that will pass the way forward to Nigeria's security challenges. Thank you very much, everyone. It's really an honor to have you here. We agreed not to waste our time. This is a welcome address delivered on behalf of my ED once again, Dr. Oladiran Bello. We'll proceed because we would like to pass the mic around to know each and every one of us directly. By way of introduction, once again, Kabir Adejumo is my name. I work at CGA as a senior researcher. And from my league, where the mic will go on, would like to meet each and every one of us. Thank you very much.
Hey, good morning. Colton Bridges from Library and Acquisition. I'm quiet. I'm not Christian University. Good morning, everyone. My name is Adam Abbas. I work as the Research and Communication Officer for Security at Adam Africa. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Dr. Hello, my name is Nick Roll. I'm the Abuja correspondent for AFP. My name is Mustafa Osman. I work with International Center for Investigative Reporting.
Thank you very much, everyone, for the great introduction. I'm glad we all know ourselves now. And again, we appreciate everyone for coming here. So while in the course of the introduction, another guest entered and has also loving to introduce himself before we proceed.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry for the lateness. My name is Bakari Majid. I work with the Australian High Commission. Thank you.
Again, thank you very much by way of introduction. Now we know ourselves, we know where we work directly, and indeed, with the welcome address delivered earlier, we know why we are here. In a bit not to delay us or not to keep us waiting, I would like to call on Malik Sampre, who in a matter of time now would go proceed to the presentation of his reports. We expect that we have idea of what we are here for before we go to the hybrid session. Malik, I said that. Okay. Thank you very much, Malik. Please say a round of applause for Malik. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much. It's part of the discussion. So, the report is titled Unseen Advances and they are quite offensive visual strategic resurgence and the meanings of the response. The report basically just looked at what has happened in the first half of this year with regards to the Islamic State of Start Capital, which is one of the two factions in Nigeria. So I hope to have just 15-20 minutes. Now, for the context, I won't bore you much because I'm very sure everyone is very familiar with at least to some extent, the context of this conflict. The crisis is now in its 17th year. And with regards to ISWAP, I think since 2021, with the death of approximately Shitao, the shift in the dominance moved towards ISWAP. Since then, we've seen ISWAP increasingly becoming not just one of, but the most lethal and the most active ISIS affiliates around. And the recent data that we've seen from last year, but more especially in the first half of this year, shows a worrying resurgence that I think everybody is interested in stemming, interested in dealing with this resurgence. So, for the evidence of this, I need to mention that the focus is on ISWAP rather than just the Jamaat action, simply because I think over the years, the most threat has come from ISWAP, not just because of the death of Shekar, but also because of the league Islamic states, and also how it's been able to carry out its attacks against our military. So the focus of this report is the ISWAP, particularly references would be made to Jasmine. Now, in February this year, ISIS launched what is called the campaign, because the campaign family, which was a campaign not just limited to Nigeria, but to Chad Basin, or Nigeria being the center of the crisis. It was obvious the attacks in Cabinet. And since then, there's been over 300 attacks. Now, when I say 300 attacks, the attack is not just limited to Israel, but also attacks on gas. The majority of this attack is by Israel. And I'm sure recent infographics released by ISIS, people saw that where Israel and Canada over 200 attacks. And within this short while this year, we've seen 17 Nigerian military bases successfully overrun by the group. And when we say overrun, we don't mean just attack. We mean attacks where they took control, even temporarily. So 17 military bases temporarily spread to the group. And we've also seen an increasing use of tech, especially drones, and also increasing use of IEDs, explosive devices, and also suicide weapon explosive devices. We've also seen nighttime assaults. In fact, the majority of these attacks are nighttime attacks. And then also we've seen increasingly the deployment of foreign fighters. These fighters. Usually, initially, the part of these foreign fighters were limited to providing fighters trainings and all that. But I think recently we've seen these foreign structures, ISIS members joining the battle. Now, I think the attack by ISWAP is surprised us, even me particularly, why the insurgents, why the insurgent attack. Or something happened at the beginning of the year that we didn't pay attention to. That if we did, probably would have foreseen this attack. In January, I think around 30 January, ISIS released an editorial, that was focused on the Nigerian super camp strategy. Now, in that editorial, what we did was to do an analysis of the strategy around the super camp strategy. So, for people who are not familiar with super camp strategy, it was initiated in 2019. I think in response to the military casualties in the US, so the military needed to do something about that. So some of the part of it, bases into what they call the super tanks, to make this camp fortified and take it off for ISWAP to penetrate, which works, of course. But over time, one of the strengths of this group, ISWAP, is that it is able to adapt whatever strategy is put. So this editorial, ladies and gentlemen, was focused on this strategy and how it intends or intended to circumvent the strategy. So shortly before we started seeing this attacks against the military bases. And then again, I think in May, the group released also an editorial focused on this campaign called the Camping Family, where according to it, of course, one, it's propaganda, but again, it's instructive, seeing the editorial and what the group claims it wants to achieve, which is not just to run these camps, but to also take over the towns. We know for sure that ISWAP, of course, none of these government action has now the capacity to take over towns. But the propaganda seems to think that is the target. But even if it doesn't have that capacity to carry sport and attack to the base that compared to what Boko used to do around 2012, 2013, I think it's something to be worried about. That the group is even thinking about that. Now, for the drivers of the resurgence, what we've seen, one is the ISIS increasing support by the Islamic State, not just in terms of funding, but also in terms of doctrine. This is why we're seeing many foreign fighters coming into Nigeria. I think in the last 2 years, it's been ongoing. It's difficult to know when it's happening because of one, supporting accessing illegal and control. Now, one of the reasons for this guys coming is also for part training. And during these attacks, we've seen these trainings put to use. One, to see nighttime attacks, and also showing the use of night open. So also the fact that the groups are now strategically divided for an attack, compared to the past where they just went in large number. And then what we're seeing now is that split of groups, where we have the first group go into the camp. If there's a need for backup, another group comes in. So all this expertise is what ISIS is transferring to these guys. Again, this sounds like a cliche, but it still remains true. It states of weaknesses. We've seen fatigue, of course. We've had conversations with troops in the front line. There have been complaints about logistics. There have been complaints about intelligence. There's also been complaints about whether the willingness or the unwillingness of the troops in certain areas to engage with these guys, which is making it easy for them to run some of these bases. And then very significantly is also the gaps that is emerging from the withdrawal of Niger from the MNGTF. The MNGTF is one of the best responsible, I think, the region has put against the global faction. And then Niger played a very key role, because Niger is also strategic. These groups use Niger for a lot of reasons, for logistics, for supplies, also for the movement of fighters. But for Niger, withdrawing because of the political issues around them. So the withdrawal of Niger from the MNGTF is creating a deep gap that these guys are exploiting. And then, of course, the usual socioeconomic grievances. like the absence of the state, like to some of these communities who struggle to understand if governance is governance really exists in these certain places. And all this, fuel and influence like this because they're able to exploit this weaknesses. And very important driver of this resurgence is also the fuel expansion of the organization that we've seen start doing. After the death of Chicago in 2021, we started to give us the Minister Forest. And in taking over San Cristobal Forest, it became closer to targets that were before then difficult to reach. For instance, before the death of Chicago, Israel found it difficult to attack communities in Cameroon. Also in northern Adamawa State, but of course they were able to attack communities in the southern communities because they have the forest. But with the taking over of Sambisa, you have places like Banking, also part of things that are becoming very close and very accessible to the group. So we've seen Israel now being able to launch attacks in Cameroon, other parts of southern community and just not to do that to do so in the past, and also northern and Adamawa, the likes of Madagascar, Wichita, and all the same. These places have become closer to Israel because of taking about Sambisa. Now, with this taking over Sambisa, we also structure itself into different groups. And our structuring itself into different obviously makes it easier for it to carry out attacks without incurring heavy losses or needing too many logistics. Before the death of Chicago, the attack that resulted in the death of Chicago, many of the fighters came from around the China. So, for people familiar with the region, understand the logistical requirement to move from around the lake area to the place like Sambisa Forest. But now the taking of Sambisa Forest and the structuring, you don't necessarily need to have guys, for instance, coming all the way from the church area to the area attacks in the same motor. All you need to do is you have subgroups in these different places. You have garden forests and beside in Banking and all that. So it's easy for them to carry out these attacks. Let's take, for instance, some of the bases that have been overrun by Israel. Take Gamboa, for instance, we take Omiri, for instance, we take White Griffin, Sabo Relief. All these attacks were not by Israel fighters from the lake here, from Israel fighters from Anagami Forest. So if you look at the map, you see that it's closer. These guys do not have that close proximity to different attacks. So what this means is that with this spread that Israel has, Israel now has the capacity to launch attacks in any part of the state, whether it is successful or not, it's a different conversation. But that capacity now exists. To the point that there's also a strong group created to take care of regions outside the northeast, which they call Shimali Nigeria, which is supposedly expected to take care of operations in the northwest, north central Nigeria, and other part of the northeast that do not fall as part of the targets and territories. So this restructuring has also been a major contributor to the insurgents that we have seen. And so we go now to the implications of all what not just for the U.S. national security, but also for the regional security. Of course, we know attacks like this undermine our national stability because of continuing crisis, the resultant effects of the crisis also cannot have against the development of the region. Economic fallout, we know what is the for the region. And also, there's also the possibility of cross-border stabilization between Niger and Chad and Cameroon. which is why it is important that people don't see this crisis as a human crisis. While we talk about borders, these guys don't even think that I agree. For them as well, they understand the situation of colonial power. This, so as far as they're concerned, borders don't. So we've seen attacks in Niger, yes. We've seen attacks in Cameroon. But this one has been found it difficult to carry out attacks in Chad. I'm sure people wondering why. It's basically because of the border usually water-based. So the gas faction, particularly faction space and Chad, then which is why many of the attacks you see in Chad, particularly Chad, is supported by the faction. That is also because a lot of their fighters from the human tribe are dead, water-based attacks. So that is also one of the reasons why they also, about a year or two ago, were able to push ISWAP out of some of the so ISWAP is having a bit of an issue launching a class in Chad. Well, of course, the risk always remains, so the possibility for this thing to spread into again, the big regional cooperation that I just talked about the power of Niger also what it leads to it gives room for these guys to move, gives room for these guys to recruit, it gives room for these guys to be able to get okay, sorry. I mentioned the issue with the border, that these guys don't see borders as so the regional protection that is suffering with the withdrawal of Nigeria playing into the hands of business. To give an example, I think in 2021, ISIS did a documentary which is called Africa and the Rise of the Caliphate. In that documentary, what it basically did is to show that the West the creators of the problem we're seeing in Africa by the exploitation of the natural resources, the creation of the borders and all that. And I think about 2 weeks or 3 ago, on its different platforms, ISIS shared this same documentary. And also, what it clearly shows is that ISIS is trying to use Africa as its, as its battlefield against the West, which is called in the document, which is called the Crusaders. So the borders, our borders here, are so porous that it is easy for ISIS to send fighters to send whatever they want to send to this region. So that is the weakness in that area is the big problem. But of course, also the issue of propaganda. One of the implications for the resurgence we see is the increased development, of propaganda and also recruitment drive for the group. So for recommendation, I think it's obvious from what we've discussed. One, there's a need to strengthen military and intelligence capacity. I think one of the big changes seen in ISWAP is its ability to gather intelligence, including at the local level. We have the Nigerian security agents. I think have some of the best intelligence officers, even though their work is usually not public, but they do a lot. The problem I feel from years of following this conflict will be in the area of synergy. How do they work together in terms of sharing the intelligence? So uses what in terms of intelligence that generated. And then of course there's a need to revitalize the energy here by way of engaging Niger. With whatever the political difference we have, we cannot continue expecting Niger to remain out of the emergency. Whatever the authorities need to do, they need to have that conversation to bring Niger back. Niger is one of the important sectors for the emergency, I think, which is the sector 4. But again, beyond that, Niger is a corridor for movement for fighters and social justice. A lot of the views that ISWAP source from interviews with the former members, a lot of the views come from Niger, even though they originate from Nigeria. But of course, it is not illegal for goods to move from Nigeria to Niger. But when they get to Niger, there are divergence and points that are areas where these goods are, diverted into the island. So working with Niger will help in terms of intelligence that to extend some of this stuff. Then the usual, like I said, maybe it's a cliche, but it's true, to address the root causes, jobs, education, and governance. There's only so much that the military can do. The military cannot militarily solve this problem because the root causes are not military issue. The issue of governance. There's nothing that the military can do in the area of governance. There's nothing the military can do in the area of drug relation or the provision of education. So these are issues that governance, things like the program of, I guess, we need to take really serious. And then, of course, the issue of civilian protection is really important. One of the drivers of movement is human rights abuses. It's also the limitation of where communities see the state are being predatory to its security forces. And we've seen civilians also increasingly being caught in the middle between the military and I think recently we released very gruesome video where most of the public betrayers were interrogated and then killed. Amongst them, there have been 2 or 3 community leaders that were accused of providing information to the military of the security forces. So if we get information from civilians at the community level, there should be adequate protection for security. And another thing is that the countries in the region must work with tech companies. They must find a way to work with tech companies. But it means also seeking help from outside the region. We should be done. I think the EU level they've been able to involve with tech companies to prevent the spread of social media. But here it's a big problem to see. Currently there are at least 18 telegrams and 14 WhatsApp accounts. We all need to ISIS that are active, very, very active in the country, as you speak. If you look at the images, I think the first one is one of the WhatsApp channels for ISIS. The other one, Cycle, is another social media platform called Fluffy Chat. Then we have a Gen Space. So these are all very, very active in the country, and there's I don't think much is being done to keep these guys off this platform. But this is why countries need to work with tech companies to try and get to this out. So you see, Telegram has done really well in terms of deleting a lot of this channel. So this is one of the bots on Telegram that I was deleted. So you see this is messaging events when you try to access such a channel. And at least I think within the last 2 months, at least 24 of these accounts have been deleted. But these guys are so persistent that the more you delete, the more they create. And they say it. If you can delete them, you still keep creating. But I think it doesn't mean we should stop. We should continue to get these guys in this platform because it's not just for that purpose, it's also for improvement. You know, so these are some of the channels that have been deleted. The left and the right all you see deleted account. But you see what's in the middle. These are still very active in countries we know speak so in conclusion, what we've seen with regards to the subjects it's not accidental, you know, it is strategic, it is sustained. From the 2 years we start at the beginning, we can show that this subjects is the you know, the structuring we talked about, also very significant in this part subject. But of course, the civil application is also a big problem. It's not just signals are not only following victims just, but also using the ISWAP is becoming very future as it asserts itself in communities to ensure that communities don't provide information to the signals are becoming more and more. And again, what we've seen is that military gains alone are not sufficient to degrade response. Like 17th year, if you like, heavily military, we still made gains, but the conflict is still very much right. So needs for alternative approaches, cost to complement the military. And again, our strategy is not too different from what I just said. Strategy must also be calibrated. You know, there is need for governments to strengthen this community level. There is a need for enhanced cooperation, not just among security agents, but also between the security agents and the community and the communities. There's a need to build a trust between government and people. And of course, there's a need for us for military and security agents to deal with conflict. You know, what we've seen largely is that we are reactive. Like in terms of response, when we react to an attack, we react to something. I think that we need for security agents and military to be in the country to take the initiative. I think we've gone to the end. So we don't take too much time. Thank you so much for.
Thank you very much, Malik Samuel. So insightful and a wonderful presentation, I would say. I understand that we got panel session because one thing that struck me while you were speaking for me is actually the use of social media. You know, we understand that you know, the fake news on social media trigger a lot of things, and ordinarily these bad guys also use social media to propagate their activities. This, for me, it's really a reflection. And I'd like to just ask that in your own, I mean, from your findings and interactions with, you know, experts, how do you think, you know, these organizations like Meta, like X, and every other social media companies could actually address these menace, if I may ask, Malik?
Yeah, you rightly mentioned, we hope to hear from experts who and some of this issue during panel discussion. But I think social media companies can do is I think there are you have algorithms that are able to identify some of these messages. I know TikTok is doing a lot when it comes to the messages from jazz. Telegram is focusing on lot of ISWAP. So it means they are able to find, I think there are, I don't know how they do it, but I'm not exactly saying, but I'm sure there are signals, there are messages that should be able to raise, to flag, to raise some red flags. So, these messages cannot, cannot fly in this event. But I think the law is that as a country, as countries in the, in the region, I'm not sure whether we have that, whether we have the access to it. This is why I think we need to work on, we need to work with the types of meta Facebook that we mentioned, WhatsApp and Telegram and all that. So to whether to design, to have contacts that say if there's a particular message that is sent to this platform that they are flagged. I think this is one of the ways. And I think one of the things that Telegram does is that any number that is used that is recognized to be part of this, and that group is deleted, every number associated with that group is banned. And I think that's a good way to do that. I think there's definitely more that can be done. Then I'll wait for the experts to handle some of this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malik. And indeed, we cannot wait for that time, but it's really a major part of this, event. If we check our agenda, we realize that the next in line is that, having listened to the presentation by Malik, that we proceed for tea break. I'd like to inform everyone that we've got copies of the reports available. And, by the time we are done with our tea break, before we return back, each and every one of us would have a copy of the reports on our desk so that we can all go through and even after this session. And one thing that we can assure you again is that aside from the physical copies, we are also willing to share the PDF version with you alongside the recording of all of these sessions. Thank you very much once again, everyone, for being here. And I think if we can then proceed for tea break, and after we come back, we will be back for our panel session. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone who was back. I understand that yes, some of us are still having a tea break. It's fine. Maybe we could all make it a walking tea break. The idea is that we eventually complete this event by 1 p.m. And we've got some people who are online who have already known this house. As I said, it's the presentation of our research on ISWAP resurgence and also a security dialogue from experts who will be coming to analyze issues, and we share some of these findings, ask questions on way forward, and how Nigeria can do better as a nation in tackling insurgents or general security at large. So I'd like to proceed now by calling on Malik Samuel, who is going to moderate the panel discussion with two keynote experts whom we have invited to join us to share their expertise this afternoon. My Nick will be here. He was very bad about these two people, and is able to interrogate or better still ask some questions that help us chat way forward. And after that, it's indeed, I understand that while he was presenting, we all have quite a lot of questions that we want to ask, and we'll be able to ask this expert. So, Malik, I'd like to call on you to join us on the podium. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So, for me, this is usually for me the interesting part where we get to hear from experts who have worked a lot in these issues. So first, I will have Honorable Aliyu Ibrahim Gibi, who is a big brother and also a mentor when it comes to the conflict, not just in the Northeast, but also in the Chad Basin. Honorable Gibi is the special advisor to the Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff on non-kinetic strategy. He is currently the head of peace, dialogue, and the conciliation department at Operation Safe Corridor. Operation Safe Corridor oversees Nigeria's DDR. He is also the coordinator of the National Fusion Cell on dialogue and peace processes in the Northeast, the Northwest, and North Central Nigeria. Again, he's a member of the Nigerian Foreign Ministers Advisory Group and ECOWAS and the Alliance of Sahel States, as well as a member of the Review Committee for the Nigerian National Defense Policy of 2017. He is a former member of the Nigerian National Assembly, where he chaired the House Committee on Internal Security. He was also during that time a member of the ECOWAS Parliament, during which he also served as Deputy Chairman of the Committee on Trade, Customs, and Free Movement of Persons. So please, it's a journey of welcoming Honorable Gibi as one of our panelists. Sorry, please, I think we'll have our discussion here. So our second panelist is a friend, a colleague, who is also a researcher, Mustafa Hassan, who is a policy-oriented researcher and a development practitioner in over a decade of experience in the working across Africa and the Middle East. Most of us career spans crisis response, governance, and peace building, with a focus on designing and implementing programs that address development deficit and promote stability in Nigeria, Niger, and beyond. Most of us serve as research advisor on the board of the Mental Health and Psychosocial Support Action for Quality Education Initiative. There are several roles and consultancies with different organizations, such as the UNDP, the POM International Center for Conflict and Studies. I think they recently published the research on the Chad Basin. So that is who Mustafa is. He's also worked with the NIM Foundation. So please join me in welcoming Mustafa. So, what we tried to do is to have two people working, one in the policy area. Honorable Aliyu is the policy expert in these issues, and Mustafa is a researcher who has engaged and done a lot at community level. So it's important to have people from both areas. And so we have, I think, about 40 minutes, maybe hour for the panel discussion and Q&A. So people have questions for our editing. We'll start with Conor. Your role involves shaping analytic strategies. And the report we just gone through suggests that military action alone is not enough to defeat this one, not just ISWAP, including JAS. So, in your view, what non-kinetic interventions have shown the most promise in Nigeria? And what are the areas, what are the problems scaling them up?
Thank you very much, my colleagues. It is an honor and a privilege to be here. And I think the mentorship is the other way around. I think it's my mentor. And I'm standing up because the depth of understanding about the family issues cannot be right. So it's really honestly here to hear when you present the proposals that has been so succinctly captured. It's congratulations. But it's very simple. Kinetic means we win the war, but not kinetic reasons. We win the peace. I've been doing this for 15 years officially. Unofficially, I've been doing this since 2006. Coming from the northeastern part of Nigeria, there's no way one can operate and be a part of this problem, and perhaps a part of the solution, now that we are sure the time is right. What can be done? Nothing can be done if there's no political will. Nothing can be done. What has been missing is that political will. That's the very dust that has been missing. And if the political will is there, sincerely there, then I think we can resolve this problem possibly next week. In terms of tangibles, we must understand we bandy around the word hybrid without really contextualizing what is happening in the Northeast specifically. The hybrid threat has three circles. You have the insurgency, you have organized crime, and then you have normal crime. The insurgency, of course, to be dismantled and degraded by the military, so that it becomes the second stage, which is organized crime. And then a specialist component of the police or an ad hoc arrangement to further dismantle the second circle to the last circle, which is normal crime, which the police should handle until the end of time. Over and over again, the military have degraded and dismantled the insurgency over and over and over and over again. And then it becomes organized crime, which is the natural gestation period for every insurgency. But unfortunately, because there's no follow through, the organized criminal component regenerates itself back into an insurgency, and then the military begins talking. So literally, before the military personnel could remove their books and hand up their rifle, they come back to participate. Second issue, we have symbiotic insurgencies now, where before we had symbiotic organized criminal franchise, now we have symbiotic insurgencies. This is what we're seeing. Thirdly, there was no strategic operational relationship between the Nigerian insurgents and any external insurgents. It was a local issue. It has been for a very, 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 very long time, sadly until now. Now it has become international. So where before the antipode could have been brother talking to each other, now it's slightly more complex and more complicated. In terms of what Mali presented, the resurgence, there are many factors that brought about the resurgence. Amongst which is, of course, the military stretching the equipment. But I am of the opinion we don't buy equipment that is fit for purpose. We buy equipment that is defined by vendors. This is supposed to have been led by intelligence special operators and decapitate and remarkable. But unfortunately, every weapons team in the nation and individuals in Nigeria as part of the ground, and the Czech based ground, basing in India as part of the ground, and of course the wider. So we do not buy fit for purpose equipment. We are made to buy equipment as if we're fighting on state. So with the tool does not solve the problem. Then we also assume when the civil war was raging between Jamaat al-Sunnah in our Jihad and ISWAP, we kind of stepped back thinking they were uniting themselves. And then we just come in and that's it. So we took our eyes off the ball. But the most critical component is the drawdown of troops as well as equipment to focus on the Northwest. This was done, of course, the military, the war plan was better, but I think this was done prematurely, thinking that we had defeated the enemy. So the resurgence is not so much because they have been booked and been given employment and it is more because they have to be pushed. Yes, because we can blame each other but that is not entirely accurate. As long as we don't disrupt their recruitment strategies, as long as we don't ensure recruitment that happened for 18 months unchecked by any agency country in the world, in Northern Ghana, which fed into this. As long as we do not stop artisanal miners from giving gold back to enrich insurgent groups in the wider civilian space, this will continue. Lastly, of course, we all the Romadan was successful influence, but nobody's talking about the Romadan. Nobody is coming out of the bush. Rather, people are going back into the bush, and people are going back into the bush. And we, as important to franchise, and having come out, they know the nuances of what we do. But the most important thing, and I want this to reflect on this, is whenever the political calendar is about to come on, there's a politicization of the security team. We don't realize that 2027 has started. The whole of 2026 is primary election. Usually primary elections are the last quarter, so 4 months of insecurity, February, we hold the election. So we're beginning to see the weaponization of the political security terrain. And also the adversaries in the bush are very clever. They know during elections or the advent of elections, politicians procure the violence. So they pump in a lot of money so that they can have the freedom of movement and action to campaign. Now, where we are now is a very delicate situation. There are actors who need violence to remain in office. There are actors who need violence to come into office. So this is what we should be looking at. And I think this is where we have done the conversation. We talk about security governance, the role of INEC, the role of the society, the role of border communities. You cannot have a security framework where the border communities are not strengthened, where they are not, the so-called resilience is not being there. If we secure the borders and we don't build building fences, if we secure the people living in the border communities, then we will secure the hinterlands of the country. Then we also talk about Niger, what is being done. We talk about the regional intelligence unit. Ours is a war that space that, in my opinion, is overloaded with intelligence. When the Fulani bandits are on the rampage, at least 10,000 people will see 300 bikes moving. And the same with Boko Haram. Then the concept of super camp. So then what is missing is that political direction. Now, even the most capable fighting force in the world, the United States Armed Forces, is only as competent as the political direction that is given to it. So if there is no political direction, then the most capable fighting force in the world is impotent.
Thank you so much for that very well-weighted response. Now, this ties to the next question of Mr. Han. One thing the report we talks about is how increasingly ISWAP is filling the governance space, especially in remote communities where the state is actually in the position. From your experience, in this building, how should the Nigerian state and its partners, respond to such governance and the governance that is proving more consistent and responsible than the state presence in some of these very, very difficult areas?
Thank you, Malik, and good morning, everyone. Malik put me on the spot. He set me up for Honorable to speak before me. That's a tall one. So I'm not sure I can compete with any of those responses. But I think I'll build up from the response from Malik to talk about the organization of the political calendar first of all. I was reflecting on responding from the political angle first of all, particularly because while politicians are interested in 2027, these groups are gaining significant grounds across communities. They're recruiting. And I must say, congratulations to you, Malik, and thank you for this incredibly timely report. I read it, and I think the advancements or if you're trying to understand ISWAP since 2024, June, July, or so, up until now, I think the report is one of the key things I have read that also corroborates with a lot of the work that I've done. One of the things Malik and I do is, one, we're also very close, we try our best to speak to different people so that we can triangulate the data we're collecting. And as such, so to answer your question, the first thing is the issue of adaptation, right? Boko Haram from 2009 to JAS or ISWAP in 2009, they're all different groups, right? The group in itself, and I really like what you said in the report with regards to the understanding of the supercon strategy. The group in itself has evolved time and time again. For instance, what has been the response of the state? Has the state in our response or our strategy evolved as quickly as possible or as quickly as the push that the state is fighting? That's a significant question. Because in that sense, you then see a significant gap where the response, as I think you almost said it earlier, where the response is always reactive rather than being proactive. Right? So this evolution is something that we ultimately have to understand. And also, you have to be ahead of the curve, not necessarily responding to it. Now, again, the governance vacuums. For me, I always laugh. Recently, I was at an event and someone asked me, ISWAP is gaining grounds in Nigeria and what's happening, blah, blah, blah. And I said, look, it's simple. I gave the analogy of cancer, right? Someone has cancer and then we've been taking paracetamol or Panadol or ibuprofen. We've not resolved the fundamental issues. Even in your report, you said it's like overbeating or overflogging the major issues. And I noticed what you did tactically, you put the core issues as I think number 3 factor, right? But those still remain the issues of unemployment, the issues of livelihoods, these issues of governance vacuums that have led people to join these groups in the very first place, right? And this creates a significant legitimate crisis for any government, anyone involved. The issue also is when it comes to governance, governance is largely about trust, it's about presence, it's about performance. Now, when you put a table or you try to compare a group like ISWAP, for instance, this is the Nigerian state. ISWAP, for instance, will punish rogue officials who have gone wrong. They will punish them, they will demote them, they will do all manner of things. But in the case of the Nigerian state, when we have commanders who have been found guilty or allegedly for issues of corruption or anything, what has the Nigerian state's response been? Now, with the issue of presence as well, in many of these communities, you find that we don't necessarily have, I don't like to say that there are spaces that are governed, that you don't have state lockdown, government. No, you have a level of the semblance of governance. And this is where the issue of indigenous knowledge comes in, because many of these non-state actors have a good understanding of the territories that they operate in. They know who the traditional leaders are, as against militaries or national governments or national armies that will come and be trying to understand. No, they understand the systems and then they exploit them for their own use. So these are some of the issues. They are not necessarily on government space. They are spaces that are governed very, very differently. And so if you ask how then are they effectively collecting taxes, right? In what you see in many of these communities when you go and you speak to people, is that clearly even the issue of locally of violence, people clearly are afraid of ISWAP over the Nigerian government or the Nigerian government. So it's also a case of damn if I do and damn if I don't, right? So people are almost in a catch-22, where look, it's either I give a certain percentage of my beans harvest to this insurgent group, then I can fund, then I can provide livelihood for my families. Just to quickly summarize, I think some of the three key things that we can do is to ensure that the governance is locally invested, right? So anything we do has to be local. It has to come from government or part of the right? We have to ensure that there's civilian presence. We cannot go our way to peace. We are not going to be able to achieve anything. And I think in Damasak and in Iran, one of the key things that was very present there were the presence of NGOs. They had a level of legitimacy within communities. And lastly, I think one thing that we've taken for granted is that we are in significant information warfare. I think 3 or 4 days ago, ISWAP released they released the video very, very recently. And the response to information warfare is not just the kinetic fight that we're doing with the non-kinetic response. It's also this information warfare, like Randy pointed out on the use of social media. I'm stopping.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question related to that. One thing we report, is yes, we know ISWAP tries to fill some of the governance, some spaces by presenting its involvement in this agreement. But we've also seen the group using very coercive and transactional ways dealing with the people with taxation, punishment. And again, we've also seen cases where communities are accused by the state of complicity in aiding these groups. And there exist people in the communities that work with this group, not necessarily because they agree and want to do the group, but for livelihood, for profiteering, for profit making, and all that. So, drawing from your work, your integration work, and union, how do we distinguish between those who are victims of insurgent control in these spaces, and those who willingly complicit, especially when we design pathways for implementation and people who experience.
Thank you, Malik. I think it's good to put on the record. I can't remember specifically the community, but there were communities in Yobe State, I think, who had participated, who had provided some sort of intel to the Nigerian military. I think this was last year, sometime around July, if you remember. And then ISWAP came out, and then they slaughtered people. They killed members of that community. And that case is not isolated. It's not in isolation. There are many pockets of communities where people have been killed or punished for associating with these groups. So what you then see is an organized form of coalition in itself across these communities. So to answer your question, I think this is one thing that the organization like very well is the issue of some sort of screening, right? To be able to determine the degree of agency, right? And I'm wondering, we spoke about the volume model earlier. And one of the key things for any DDR process to be effective really is to understand the degree of at which, so for instance, in this panel, we have a journalist, we have a policy leader, we have a researcher, right? So the degree of agency to that particular culture. And so the role that they could had, for instance, with Axel, is entirely different from the role that that a logistics person or someone who provided fuel, for instance, or someone who was who's a mastermind, for instance, provides. So this degree of agencies would be incredibly important, particularly as it concerns children associated with violence, because in many cases these children were forced, so to speak. I think UNBC and UNICEF has done a lot of advocacy, particularly in our community levels. Speaking of communities, I think in Jambo and Palma, they've done a really good job in supporting communities help identify, particularly when it comes to issues of gender-based violence. Again, there's so many theories on this, but then community-led integration practices help. And then this also helps in the issues of preparing communities back to acceptance, so you don't get some level of impact. Lastly, I think which is very, very important is also the issue of ensuring that there's psychological things that we use in profiling people. So what they say, for instance, we take up from the way that they actually play, but then we get good counselors or good psychologists, they basically be able to identify using specific tools. I always advocate that as scientific as possible.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to come back to you. ISWAP evidently is continue to expand, trying to expand its influence. Despite, and this is despite what I feel some military spending. I was like just space recently where the issue was looked at, the issue of defense spending versus output. One key thing we've seen is the expansion of ISWAP is its ability to embed certain communities by gathering intelligence from within communities. Now, so how can our military, how can our security agents also better integrate community intelligence and anyone system then attack first? I'm sure the video Mr. Ban mentioned recently, where ISWAP is clearly written on punishing communities for giving information to children. How can we better use global intelligence by also ensuring that the real intelligence is coming from these communities, they are also how can we do it?
Thank you, Malik. And I think you're giving the easy questions. And then it's a very loaded question. But the first premise is to win the support of the civilian population. For them to understand that this is their liberty, fighting and dying on their behalf. There needs to be that fundamental understanding of the cause. Our cause is just, and they're dying and killing for the just cause. And number two, it's also paradoxical that we tend to assume we have the monopoly of knowledge. So these guys in the bush are too backward in the evolutionary trajectory to think like us or to outthink us. And we also assume the only enemy is the enemy that has picked up the rifle that we're fighting. When we go back to the history of Boko Haram, the time of Muhammad Yusuf, the taxation regime was there. Every store owner in the big markets will receive an envelope with a note, but they will pay taxation, they will pay taxes. That has not changed. The ideology, we think that the ideology is so dominant. Everybody dislikes this ideology. No, this ideology has a link. There are more people than you have to know. So we are not just fighting people that want to Islamize Nigeria. It is not about Islamization. This is why you don't hear any of them talking about Islamization anymore. That shit has said it is about the ideology that is more compatible with our own organic realities. Western civilization has failed. Individualism has replaced collectivism, and this is the premise of that. And then number two, we tend to think again those tools that the jasus, the spies, of government use. The process, the principles of life, money, work, and we tend to think that it is the exclusive piece of organizing civilized society, the intelligence communities, as well as the politicians, but they also deploy it. And again, we are forgetting that one of the greatest motivators is personal grievances, vengeance, personal grievances. There are traditional grievances that have not been addressed, and we have created more traditional grievances for the next generation. The grievances of today will be the grievances of the next 10 years, next 25 years. So we are talking about how to begin to roll back and solve these issues. We need to talk to each other, and we need to begin to address the grievances. Muhammad Yusuf had 7 grievances. After his death, there were 7 grievances. And these grievances are compatible with constitutional law. In fact, they are guaranteed in the Constitution. But we have moved away from those 7 points. We never bothered to address even 1. So perhaps if we had addressed 5, Sheiko would not have recognized to the extent that he did. Number 3, again, we tend to think everyone should be as educated as us in terms of Western education, speak English, etc. As such, the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999 as amended, is a highly technical document, like all constitutions. But the Americans succeeded in oversimplifying the parts that the citizens should govern themselves by. I mean, sometimes we say the 5th Amendment, the 2nd Amendment, the 4th Amendment. When the British gave us Chatham House, you don't know Mr. Chatham, you don't know his house, right? But we have not simplified the components of our own constitution to the extent that there is vertical understanding, will always be controlled. So if Sheikh Long had known there was Sharia guaranteed in the constitution, perhaps he would not have been for Sharia, he would have been for something else. Hybrid policing is there in the constitution. Traditional customary courts, Sharia courts. So if you're talking about the restoration, gradual restoration of civil authority, you should not be thinking in terms of sending back the High Court of Justice or sending back the Nigerian police. We should be thinking of enabling those components that are organic to those communities. So the traditional courts, the Sharia courts, they don't want mixed schools, and the Constitution gives the right for segregation. So every solution should have that organic component. But the most important part that the board should look at now, we have been presented with an opportunity. Abu Al-Jawlani, who was a candidate and as ISIS is one of the baddest human beings in the world, is today a welcome guest in Washington. The whole world sees the good in this guy, right? And it's not just him. In Somalia, you have Abu Mukhtar, Abu Mukhtar, who today also had a $10 million bounty by the Americans. Today is a minister in the Somalian government, Minister of Religious Affairs and Hajj Endowment, and I dare say one of the best performing ministers. In Nigeria, we also had a very senior Salafist who shed tears of joy when Osama bin Laden carried out attacks. Who now joined the government, became a very senior member of that government, and there is running perhaps to be governor. So the world has not latched on the fact that jihadists know that they cannot govern. They can't govern. They are not wired to govern. The doctrine does not allow for governance. Once they seize the territory and they begin to administer it, the cancer that they claim to be fighting will begin to manifest. They cannot govern. They know this, we know this. So on the alternative, what should we do? Political inclusion. We talk about inclusion only horizontally. Abu Jolani was asked, why did you not join Al-Qaeda? And his response was as refreshing as it was naively competent. I wanted to participate in the political process, but there was no platform. So the same here. If I am from my local government and I'm the best suited candidate to be the councillor of my people and my will, for the love of God, allow them to have their way, not only their say. Don't impose. So if we begin to think about political integration rather than just the integration of people into an already devastated community, perhaps people will begin to influence. Lastly, the deliberate weaponization of politics, weaponization of poverty, weaponization of religion, weaponization of ethnicity, etc., etc., etc. What my generation must bequeath to your generation is the space to talk. We need to create peace plans. Nigerian youth should be given the space in the 774 local governments, everyone to pick up the mic, free mic, to vent, to rant, and to resolve their own problems. But as long as we will think it's the older generation that will solve the problem that they created, thereby denying the youth the space to determine their future and resolve their problems in their own uniquely imaginative way, It is never going to happen. You talked about social media. That is just one item. There was social media before there was electronic social media. It still exists. It will exist. However, we do not produce nearly enough content to saturate the space. Rather, we hunt and kill. If you put so much alternative narrative out there, we are afraid to talk as Nigerians. For some reason, we like to speak, but we don't want to talk. If you saturate the space with the right content, we know the verses from the Quran that they use. We know the number of hadith that they use. We know the books that they use. And there are at least 1 million alternative narratives. But rather, no, we rather spend so much money to buy an equipment to hunt and kill social media accounts. Again, goes back to my initial session where we don't buy the tools that we require to solve the problem.
So much. And I think a lot of what you say is related to something like this, especially the fact that India is in like that government. And it reminds me of some of the internal dynamics in ISWAP. They are having real trouble. But the fortunate thing for them, unfortunately, was there's no way for us to know what's happening there and take advantage of that. And probably they also benefit from the link with ISIS, because I think without that support from ISIS, ISWAP should by now be one degree of justice. Or given the emphasis on regional dynamics, and the gaps in coordination, I talked about positivity of the border, still influence, foreigners. I think about 2 weeks ago, we learned that 2 people also came into Nigeria, one from Syria, one from Chechnya. Why is it so easy to have these people come into this region? So what should the security architecture, what steps should we be taking, or what should we be doing to strengthen these joint operations across borders, especially with the withdrawal or the reduced operation of Niger in the MNJTF? Because the MNJTF is around the border, does very, very good job, should be doing a lot. So what should we be doing to stem this tide, this influx, and also enhance more cooperation regionally?
Thank you. Thank you, Lee. When we talk about porosity of the border, again, we present ourselves with a very easy question to answer. Or perhaps we don't want to answer, or we don't like the answer. Borders, by their construct, are designed to be porous. Simple as that. But you cannot you have a border and it's this notion of a fixed banking, and people cannot compete, and people cannot go out from the structure. Right? Borders by design are supposed to be borders. And don't forget also, we work within the protocols of ECOWAS, the free movement of people's services and goods. We cannot eat our cake and have it. Then the integration of our people. You have a family on the border where the main extent of the chief, this so many kilometers into Niger, this way into Nigeria. The man on this side has 2 wives on that side and this side. For example, myself, my mother comes from Niger, from Aganis. So the question of identity itself has been lost within the modern construct of identity. And these guys are able to revert back to the traditional construct of identity. Before you even hit it on religion, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the world is his, go to wherever you want. If you are not happy here, that's fine. So the Nigerian Muslim has as much rights as the Australian citizen, if he migrates there. So we need to understand the traditional construct, and perhaps by doing so, we begin to go back to how did we do it before? These borders, whatever we call them, existed. The different peoples existed. How were we able to govern ourselves? How were we able to put checks and balances? Perhaps the answer is so simple, and we overthink the solution. And we think the solution must be something that is compatible with the universal ideas of best practices. If we don't strengthen the border communities, if we don't ensure that resilience that we like to talk about, we don't give it there first. Our first line early warning system is already collapsed. Then we do the full ideas that everybody think of them as a villain. These are people that traverse the entirety of the continent with their cattle and everything. Imagine if the intelligence community had embedded in the Fulanis instead of treating them to be the enemy. Imagine the volume of intelligence. They see everything. People who move guns, drugs, tobacco, human beings, every single thing. Well, because there is a deliberate policy of exclusion, they have no value other than the nuisance value that they raid people and they run their house into farms and they destroy crops. So it's not so much about the security architecture, it's not so much about procurement. And the problem with Nigeria is the solution to every problem is procurement. Everyone is waiting for the budget. So we wait for the budget. We can't fight Boko Haram now. We have to wait for the budget to start with crude oil, get the receipts, then we buy the equipment. Whereas maybe perhaps one guided missile of Super Tucano costs $100,000. $100,000. Give it to me in cash in about, let me enter something. We'll make a hit. Right. So opportunities, but more than anything else, in conclusion, we must become merchants of hope. We must sell hope to the youth. And you cannot sell a product that you don't believe. I believe in Nigeria. I believe this is one of the greatest countries in the world. Nigeria, if I would come back a billion times, I want to come back as a Nigerian. And I beg God Almighty to take my life in Nigeria. It works. But again, we've become addicted to bad news. We only see the bad, we don't see the good. We sit here and say they have run over the 20 airports. If you know what the Nigerian intelligence community, for every rollback perhaps the Nigerian government, the Nigerian defense actors have diffused maybe 100. But we don't see that. Right? We only see what they do when they do. And they are planning. Executing informants is a sign of planning. It's possible. It means we are making a dent. It means we are getting intelligence. In fact, we have an overload of intelligence, and the conventional modern systems are not really so to timely analyze and operationalize such intelligence. One last note, I just remembered this part of what you said. We have become tactical instead of strategic. That's our greatest problem. So we respond. We don't have value for operational successes. We only recognize political success. So someone has been adopted. We don't question why that person was adopted. We celebrate when this person is also back. Again, because it is tangible, the politician will see, yes, we got this person back, we're better than the last administration. So simple as
Thank you so much. It's always refreshing listening to you. And I agree that intelligence agencies are doing what we don't see. Probably that is how we are wired, that we don't talk about what we do. Because I remember during midterms, there's a particular question asked. Yeah, this group has carried out so much hard work in the market, created the desire to look at Northwest and Central Nigeria, but how combating has happened? And they mentioned something. The arrest of one of their members sets them back. So they need to go back to and plan again. So I think that is credit to the intelligence agencies, but unfortunately, these are not things they come out and say. So I just wanted to say yes, quite agree. And lastly, and after this, before we look into the yes, if you have questions, get them ready. You've championed, indigenous knowledge community-led approaches, including the board community level. And so, given these subjects, and the limits of native approaches we talked about, in your view, in the line of work that you do, what literally grounded, non-native strategy do you think will be most promise for building long-term resilience, storing legitimacy? When I say computer communities, I'm not talking about the big center, big cities, I'm talking about these remote communities where it is easy for this to this 5 million of happiness.
That's not fair. I think Honorable touched on the issue of identity, right? And some of my research has touched on indigenous knowledge systems, particularly with regards to the issues of transitional justice, right? And the kind of Uru Empire has existed for years and years and years before now. And when you start to think of whether it's academy or all of the other leaders that they've had in the region, they've had systems of resolving conflicts, systems of creating peace or sustaining the peace. right? Whether you go to Madagali or you go to Michigan around the Mandara mountains areas. These are communities where we've had significant success with regards to rehabilitation or integration. And just to agree with the two panels, the significant success of the intelligence community. This is something you hear from the ground, right? People tell me they know, right? So I'm also reiterating this because it's Nigerian security systems or architecture, particularly the intelligence community, know the successes of some of whether it's the Kabaka system that has been utilized in swearing or going through some level of rituals. And again, when the commutation, just to highlight some of it, when we speak about rituals, it's often quick to say, oh, a centric form of a ritual, right? However, even if you pray, when you kneel to pray in itself, it's a ritual, right? From a lot of my work, I've been able to see that many indigenous communities or many things, and as such, when people swear with these systems or someone takes the ground and swear, the likelihood that they for penance or not going back to is significantly higher. And this is something that you see in different pockets across different places. So rather than focus on policy issues, I think it's time for us to start looking, for instance, what the Rwandans did with the Gachacha system, but also understanding that we will have a lot of work to do to harmonize such a system, because every community you move from in the Northeast alone have different indigenous systems, right? Whether it's the Kanuris, whether it's the Bacham, any different community has the systems that are there. Now, are those systems still existing, right? Maybe are there systems where are they under threat, for instance? Absolutely, they're on the club. But it's high time we begin to draw in some of the traditional leaders. And I'm not just talking the Indians and the right? Many of these custodians of these systems, they are there, particularly when it comes to the issue of rehabilitation or integration. And as a closing note, I think whether we get people to swear within the system or deploy the result, we do not resolve the existing problems, the issues that have led or created an environment that is fertile with these problems, right? It's almost like when you wake up, particularly as a young person in Nigeria, when you hear people, they say, oh, the times of our fathers were by far better than the times of now. So it's almost like there is this longing for a historical past, which in itself, Boko Haram and groups like ISWAP have utilized to get people with that longing for some sort of Islamic caliphate and so on. So again, whether it's in our strategic communications or in the programs that we design, there is room for us to be able to adapt many of these issues or many of these lessons. And just before I close, I think in itself, this event is a hybrid event, right? Online and in person. And we've used the word hybrid a lot. I think the only way for us to move forward is to take what is good in laws and adapt them to the realities of the ground. The only way forward is happening.
Thank you so much to my panelists. So the floor now is open for questions. This the idea was to close by one, but we just 5 minutes for one. So we'll extend a bit every quarter or 20 minutes past one, depending on the questions that we have, because we launch is fine. So I'll allow Kabir, please ask if have questions.
I'm taking notes. 2, 3, 4, 2. Anyone? Okay, so I think I should start from you, sir. Yes, your name and your language.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Finally, nice to meet you all. Ali Ibrahim. I see you most times on the rise to me I see a couple of places and also in South. And I also saw you on the Twitter as well. I'm sorry to upset. So my name is Sentinel. I'm Felix Omokaro. I'm currently consultant in station. I love Energy Solutions Limited. Basically focus on the energy. So for Honorable Ibrahim, I have many questions for just this particular one. I've been seeing reviews and other places that we do not have a lot of soldiers. And Lydia the panel speaking about that. So, but I'll be curious for India, why is it that we still restrict the recruitment, unlike other countries where you see recruitment is continuously ongoing in a large number? So, still restricted to this number per state this year, allow the process to be fully open. It seems that for places like the regular course, it's more classic. So, but military shouldn't be that way. It's more of a service. So why are we still, since you are in the advisor to the defense chief, maybe you can also, you pointed this out, maybe you can also point this out to, thank you.
So, sir, I think the idea is that if we are able to have all of these questions, then we then address them. I don't know if does that work or you want to address one after the other? Okay, fine. Okay, it's all right.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a fantastic question. And I will answer as the predecessor, not as an advisor to the CPS. Everywhere I was in Parliament, I asked the same question. But the answer is simple. First, we don't have the money, because everything is hinged on the budget. So you have to make appropriation for X number of soldiers that the budget can accommodate. This is the sad reality. Number two, there are states, a lot of states that never fill their quota. They just don't want to join exactly. They don't want to join the military or any uniform service because they feel they are excluded from the federal system. They feel they're excluded from the Nigerian system. Then lastly, on the officer cadre, it is a system that we inherited. It is officers that are trained that now command men. So if you look at the topography of soldiers in Nigeria, you can see them coming, the bulk of them coming from almost just 3 or 4 states. Traditionally, they are the fighters. But the failing of our curriculum, in my opinion, at the Defense Academy is we now churn out graduates, not warriors. So the graduate of NDA sees himself as the equivalent of the graduate of ABU and so on and so on. And he's a fine boy graduate, he wants to make money. So it is not really a warrior that we charge first and lead his troops into battle. Then the training, of course, the training doctrine of soldiers, because we are going straight from vehicle training straight to war. So that because there are so many issues in Nigeria. But I totally agree with something that we need back to political will. If the political masters want us to have a 2 million man strong military force tomorrow, it is possible.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the presentation and all the analysis making. My name is Anisu Lekonto of the Embassy of the Netherlands here in Abuja. I have 2 questions. The first one is about Islamic State. You were saying that jihadists are not interested in American government, but when you only look at the definition of ISWAP and INS, so when we look very closely at it, what is the conclusion which we would make? Because in my understanding, they are willing to govern. And they are trying to project that model in the movement of at least the Northeast of Nigeria. My second question is about the political will. You were saying that there was no political will to fight this insurgency, or let's say, or more likely to resolve the issue and the security issue in the Northeast. Why is that your conclusion? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, for emphasis, jihadists cannot govern. the model of Islamic State in Baghdad has proven that without shadow of doubt. They went from a ragtag group of disgruntled angry men to building a seasoned state, producing oil, 70% of the oil, and minting the good point. And to the extent that, if you recall, the Friday preaching of Baghdad, when he had a gold Rolex on his wrist, and that resonated more than what he was saying. And then the point he had this cannot govern because they are not wired to govern. The same corruption that we see to exploit from the society, we are also penetrating. And it is normal when you have a group of people based on ideology, it is only a matter of time before they begin to fight and contest for the same powers that one of them has related to himself. And then what you have is military coup after military coup after military coup, so fractionalization. They cannot. If they were going to govern based on Sunnah, they should something about everybody will join them. But the excesses and their own personal motives and personal expectations leading to satisfy whatever it is that they never had before, will never allow them to come. Then you are political will. I agree with what my colleague said. There is no ungoverned space. There's only misgoverned spaces. So if the governance, the problem is not at the center, the problem is at the states. Again, for emphasis, federal government does not have indigents. Federal government has citizens. States have indigents. Governors govern indigents. If there is good governance, now, here's the catch. What is good governance? Are we taking good governance to be defined by the Western construct of good governance? Or are we going to define what good governance means to us? This is a country where if a governor builds a culvert, they put a red tip, invite big people, and they commission it, and that is the yardstick of measurement that this guy is working. So what is good governance? If you look at, again, the concept of our entire GDR spectrum, when you go, you are taken in, you are rehabilitated, you are trained to acquire a skill, and then you are given the tools of the trade, the skill you have acquired, and then you are inserted back into society. So perhaps with good governance, if every youth that should be given the skill had been given the skill, the same skill that if they had become terrorists and have gone into rehabilitation, perhaps we would have spent far less money, would have saved lives. And perhaps that would be the crux of good governance as far as our own societies are concerned. So when I say political will, I mean political will, not from the center. Political will at the state level. Let's remember how Boko Haram was formed. The political patronage, how it is here was formed. And wherever there is a group of people, they always have political will. A politician will go and leave. And because we don't have consequences for bad behavior, INEC will not bar that from that politician, they will allow him to continue. He will make promises, like some of the dialogue processes in the Northwest with the bandits that the federal government is not aware of. Governors will make promises. We will do A, B, C, D, E, which is impossible. They win the election, they come into office. They cannot give what they promise. Then it becomes a problem for federal government and the military to do. So when I say political will, I mean political wills at that level.
Thank you so much for all three of you. I've been nodding along to a lot of things you've been saying, and I think you've touched on a lot of big ideas that warrant entire other discussions. I'll ask one very simple, complicated question, which is what makes Nigeria special? The things that you've talked about as root causes, I mean, I think during your presentation you said it's a cliche, but it's a recommendation, is address the root cause. Nigeria is not the only country that has ethnic and religious diversity. Nigeria is not the only country that has corruption and bad governance. Nigeria is not the only country that has poverty. And yet, there's insurgency in the northeast, there's banditry in the northwest, there's canoe fighting in the middle belt, there's farmer murder everywhere. Is Nigeria that much different than its neighbors? And if so, what makes it so much different that these issues take on such an extreme character here?
Thank you for such a simple question. I am a school of thought that believes there's nothing special about it. We are either not special as everyone else, or everyone else is as special as us. But what makes Nigeria special is the fact that Nigeria has been a country in a state of flux since 1914. As a matter of fact, we have been in a state of permanent flux. Coming to independence, since independence, we have been in a state of accelerated flux. So stability in Nigeria is only from 1999 till now. So all the repressed anger, all the traditional grievances, all the differences, etc., all of a sudden people found a voice. They found some means, ways, mechanisms to express And of course, like someone mentioned, there's always this nostalgia for the past. There is this deliberate romanticization of the years gone by when everyone was eating honey and milk and eating chicken, which never existed. But since 1999 to now, if you recall, from the 2000 violence of Sharia when they were declared by the Gulf states, what makes Nigeria special? That politician that came up to politically declare Sharia, that gave that idea to some crazy people. So if a politician can do it, that means we can actually do it. It can be declared. If you remember the wave of violence, riots, etc., then the repressed religious grievances. So we have been in a situation of almost total anarchy from 1999 to 2007 before we started to find some semblance of stability. What makes Nigeria special? In less than a generation, we have become from the whole capital of the world to one of the world's most stable democracies. One generation, unchecked, one administration onto another, onto another. What makes Nigeria special? We're one of the few countries in Africa where a former president will not leave the country after leaving power, will reside in the country, will be given all the respect. As frivolous as our politics is, you still remain in Nigeria. President Muhammadu Buhari, God rest his soul, passed away. It united the entire country. Even people who didn't like him had some good things to say about him. People were crying as if they lost their father. This makes us special. What makes us special? The Benue Trough. What people don't understand is, even if you build steel walls, the Fulani people must go to the Benue Trough. Why? Because they believe the grass there has magical properties. If you bring 10 cattle this year, by next year will be complete. And scientifically, it has been proven. It has the highest content of alcohol. So when the cows break, they become lethargic, stay in one place eventually, meat is more tender, they produce more milk. This is what makes us special. And when the Fulanis come, all the way we are the last bus stop in the coast before we get out of town. What makes us special? Our population. If we're 500 million in West Africa, at least half of them are Nigerians. We are the most prosperous nation with the most complex problems. All the indices of a failed state could manifest, but then all the indices of being one of the greatest nations on earth also manifest. Also, we have been a crucible of religious experimentation. My colleague mentioned the Kanomoro Empire. Islam is 1,000 years old in evolution. At the peak of the Kanomoro Empire, that great empire, a young girl of 16, since it was written by a German anthropologist, could traverse the length and breadth of that great empire, because he gave it in lines of 2 kilometers of the. And he said, and I quote, she could traverse in the middle of the night, naked, draped in gold, with absolutely no fear of any mortal being except the fear of Allah, our Lord. This is how big that empire was. Then you come to the subject of elephant sword. These things that others have surpassed or have not manifested in smaller, less complex ways is what makes us special. The fact that we are special, but could be more special. But how special we become depends on the late generations of our politics and how we are able to resolve our traditional beliefs. And I'm happy to continue this conversation. We have some very radical ideas.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abubakar Hassan. I'm the host of Geopolitics with Abu podcast. It's a podcast that deals with geopolitical and security analysis in issues that affect Africa and the world at large. So my questions are to you, sir, special advisor. Is first of all, Nigeria is located in the Gulf of Guinea, which means Nigeria plays a very, very important role in global trade. And then the United States itself has to factor Nigeria into its security because the United States is also located in Atlantic Ocean. So given this fact, in terms of foreign influence in our country, we know this time that the insecurity in the Sahel is affecting the coastal state of West Africa. So how do we draw the line between our sovereignty and knowing the kind of military assistance to accept from the Western world in order for us not to, in order for them not to use us to play their geopolitical competitions in terms of the geopolitical competition between Nigeria and China, no, United States and China and other middle powers vying for interest in Africa.
Thank you. And firstly, you must understand, I know you know better than I do. And most of the things I say here, I say in my capacity as a private citizen. Nigeria has the principle of non-alignment. We can deal with whoever we want to deal with, and that's a very pragmatic approach to building the nation. In terms of partnerships, this is where there is a little bit of a gray understanding of what the partnerships mean to the United States. Are we an ally? Are we a friend? Or are we a partner? These three categories are distinctly different. There are weapon platforms and assistance the United States government will not give anyone except an ally. And how do you become an ally? You become an ally when you have mutual interests that supersede the horizontal, but which we do not. So when we get angry that the United States government does not give us the platforms that we feel we want, it's because we think of ourselves as an ally of the United States, whereas perhaps we're just a friend of the United States. So these three components also apply to France, but let's go to the United Kingdom. But the issue here, my brother, is President Obasanjo likes to say, the name you call yourself with is the name everyone else will call you by. We need to understand what we need, who we are, what we want, and begin to look at ourselves with our own eyes. But we like to look at ourselves with the eyes of the Western world. Don't forget, in the last 10 years, for example, there have been a minimum of 8 thereabouts ICT unicorns. 6 came from Nigeria. Our pop culture has influenced the entire world to the extent that all the class performers on the downward trajectory would need to collaborate with a young Nigerian artist for them to come up in literature, in fashion, etc. So, but we have not been able to articulate this as a force to galvanize based on national identity and national needs. Rather, we precipitate whatever we need as a want. And this want is defined sometimes also by people who do not understand the concept of being a Nigerian and what a nation called Nigeria should be. So our problem, don't forget, you are absolutely right. Everything is written on posters. There's no doubt about it. And we tend to forget what is happening in Sudan, also pushing down what is happening in the Central African Republic, we are pushing down and the aspirations of some PMCs to get access to greater polygon to the coast. So what should we do at this point? If you look at the maritime security apparatus that has been set up, it's second to none on the African continent. But we need to do a little bit more. We need to understand what we need, what we want, not what is wanted for us or what is thought that we should need. The United States, yes, a friend. And then we have our friends, our traditional friends, and then we have our new friends in prosperity. So politicians need to do a better job in translating this floating model that the world has presented, where there are no permanent threats, as we are seeing. If you look at the Ukrainian war, what has been given by the West in 2 months has not been given to the entirety of Africa in the last 10 years. So when the problem looks like them, they know how to solve it. But this problem does not look like them. It is our problem. And as we solve, we should look inwards and solve this problem the best way that we can, and we have the tools to solve this problem. After all, it is our own military personnel that we send out to stabilize with other countries. Even our police that we like to work. We send them out, the UN gives them commendation as some of the best policing force in the world. So my brother, we need to look at ourselves with our own eyes. And the glass, in this case, is half full, it is not half empty.
Do we have already we are going through after? It's been a pleasure to listen to the conversation so far. My name is Yusuf Kupa, I'm political analyst. My questions are directed at Mr. Hassan. Mr. Maggie, through his presentation, gave us insights to how much of social media is very close to its state actions. And we've seen that there's a reluctance, perhaps I use that word, by the state to saturate that space with content and solidarity. At the same time, there's also a reluctance by the state to forge partnerships with the leadership of these social media companies to flag this content. Why is this?
Thank you very much. I don't think it's important to answer, but I don't think that there's so much importance from the state. I think one thing, and just to build up on what Honorable said, the glass is half full, not half empty. One of the things Mani said in this report is that many accounts have been closed in the past couple of weeks. I have a good record because this is something I plan to write about Africa and I'm doing my research. I follow about 20 to 25 pages, particularly on jazz on TikTok. And many of these accounts have been cleaned as early as 8 days ago. Is there space to do more? Right? Absolutely. And this approach itself is a reflection of the Nigerian state and our response to crisis, right? So rather than observe many of these accounts and use that to gather information, intel, and all of that, we always want to do the hard route. That's very Nigerian, right? So I don't think that there is a reluctance, so to say, from the state. And again, many of these things take a lot of bilateral and diplomatic back and forth for you to be able to get to many of these accounts now, or to be able to do money. However, one thing I have to agree with you is that we've not done well, and that's kind of the point I made with regards to information warfare. We've not done well. If you remember, in the early 2000s, 2007, the National Orientation Agency had significant campaigns across television, not necessarily even on the issues of terrorism, but issues regarding tolerance and unity across the country. I think there's a significant opportunity for the National Orientation Agency to do much more. But also, it's very important to really understand the media consumption habits of people across the world. Radio is incredibly effective, and we've not been able to capitalize on many of these low-hanging fruits as they're.
Thank you. I don't think there is a reluctance. There is a lack of, in my opinion, understanding of what needs to be done and lack of consensus on what needs to be done and by whom. And as a society, we have this exclusionist tendency where if they don't like you, if you have a solution, let's give something. It's a simple thing. And it's a very Nigerian elitist way of thinking, which only goes to create these types of problems. If you are not integrated into that horizontal problem, forget about it, carry on in the some of the rock star clerics of Somalia on the African continent are in Nigeria. But we don't use them. We use them only ceremonially when there's something they call but when you go to the bush, and we have carried out very deep studies, we have used some of them, what they listen to, you find is this cleric that you think so lowly of. We have not been given to us. I think that's the count. Then in terms of shutting down accounts, that's not for me. The accounts should be open. They should be discussed. But the saturation of that space is something that we have not been able to do because we are presented with a conundrum. The military, as an organization, as an organism, does not do strategic communication. It is information warfare, propaganda, psychological operations. So the concept of strategic communications is something that is new. Why you see Burkina able to deploy effectively is because it is a military document. So they are doing what they have as a doctrine, psychological operations, information warfare, influence operations. Nigeria National Orientation Agency is not ready to do strategic communication. All of us here are good strategic communicators. Why do we have to wait for government? What Malik has done today, us having this conversation, is strategic communication. Some questions have arisen, and some answers, maybe less competent, have been given, but it will stimulate further investigation and further quest to understand why this person thought this way, and maybe on that path to find the reality. Then lastly, again, going back to the tenets of Islam, what is the greatest form of jihad? Jihad of nafs, for you to fight yourself, to combat yourself. So perhaps if the change we're looking for cannot be found outside, let us begin as an individual. I will not give bribe, I will not receive. I will not lie, I will not cheat. I will not, including the 10 commandments of Moses. And if I were doing it, you are doing it, he's doing it, and we are raising our children responsibly. The entire community one day will wake up, and vice is gone, and we're doing everything that's also big. So jihad on maps, this I agree. Lastly, nation. Everyone feels a vacuum in their hearts. We have this quest, we want to belong to something. But what is that something? And it is because up till now we have been able to build a nation, we have a country, a very strong country. Perhaps that is why we don't even have a national career, which is also its own strategic communication and content creation. So if you were to have a Nigerian national career today, whose symbol, whose food will be food? Well, which side will the pilot come from? You will find us having this discussion. I will not lie with an Igbo pilot. The pilot is emerging from the north, right? Whereas an individual can deploy an airline tomorrow. So these questions, we have to answer them. If not, future Muhammad Yusufs will come. One last point, our academic curriculum. We have to take ownership of our academic. Islamic curriculum in northern Nigeria used to be sent in the Sudan. The last time it was revisited was about 137 years ago. There are things that were deliberately not made available at that point because of our collective evolutionary consciousness that should be made available. For example, you put 100 Muslims in a room and ask each what they understand by Sharia. 99.9% of them will talk about only Sharia from a punitive perspective, not Sharia as a deterrent system, as a social justice mechanism. So there is that conversation that is not being had. So we all withdraw from the talk of Sharia. Whereas if you talk about the penal code system, this is a system of laws, right? And laws are easily interpreted, but laws don't guarantee you justice. Sharia and traditional justice mechanisms guarantee justice. So we need to look at that. If we don't look at that, COVID came, I never knew in my entire existence, I never had perform the prayer. I was never taught. I was not Hayya ala jihad, a call to jihad, but I was never told as-salatu fi buyutikum, despite the fact that the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did. If there was a thunderstorm coming, or sandstorm, he would tell Bilal, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Bilal called for prayer, tell people to pray after. During COVID, it was the Muezzin of the Grand Mosque in Kuwait that started saying that he was saying he was crying. Nobody alive has ever heard that. Number two, I didn't know I could perform the Eid prayer at home with my children. Right? So our curriculum, we need to look at our curriculum and suit it to our contextual reality, both the Western education, but more than anything else, that which is more organic to our own center of gravity as far as these problems are concerned. Sorry, I took too much.
Thank you very much. I think he wants to ask.
The last question.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. We have done on that essentially. So my question was to you. So it has to do with the stability in Israel and the interest of the ECOWAS. I'm trying to, I don't want to use some certain words, right? But with the situation of what is going on in Israel now, and where ECOWAS is standing, there have been opportunity already. Malik mentioned how the job from national university. So what are the solutions that you think, what are the solutions that can be provided to ECOWAS in making sure that they are not destabilizing the spaces for them?
I will quote the Iranian foreign minister here. We may have left ECOWAS, but we have not left the region. We just left an organization. We have not stopped being your neighbors. So just because we left ECOWAS does not mean we cannot have other types of engagements. I think Nigeria was placed in a very difficult position. In Nigeria, having the last surviving member of the people who created ECOWAS, the one being alive, and President Bola Ahmed Tinubu would be president of Nigeria and become the chairman of the board. So there were certain things that could have been done, but would not be done because we couldn't be flexible. We had to show that unified purpose with leadership as the chairman of ECOWAS. But I am of the opinion ECOWAS has completed its service as is. ECOWAS is exactly what it is. I like to say ECOWAS. We need an ECO-is. So if you look at the protocol on free movement of persons and so on and so forth, which never considered the security complexities that we're facing, the time to look at that protocol is now. So rather than allowing those guys to pull out, perhaps we should have sat down around the table and talk about that. The proliferation of PFCs is not in any of the text of ECOWAS. Nobody anticipated. Now you have a proliferation of PNCs all over, just as you do jihadists. And now is the time to sit down and bring out a protocol that will address them. Then the harder flower issue, the grazing root issue, the Fulani issue, artisanal mining, etc., etc., etc. The nice fine. Now is the time to talk about an ECOWAS that is fit for purpose for our contextual realities. And these guys, from Boita to Traore to Chen, all agree they can come back into ECOWAS, but what type of ECOWAS? The same thing we did with Mohammed Yusuf. The same thing we did with Boko Haram after Mohammed Yusuf. When they raised grievances, we did not address the grievances. We just wanted them to capitulate to what we think we should do. It's the same here. But to show you that things are not as bad as they are, they did not pull out the brief. They're still briefing. There's still some level of collaboration. And in fact, the Prime Minister of Niger was at the burial of President Muhammad Buhari. He couldn't have sneaked in. The Foreign Minister gave authorization after the President declared, after the NSA declared, the aircraft to come in. So the basis of discussion is still there, but we need to talk to ourselves, not at ourselves. And we need to learn to listen, to understand what we need to listen to respond. We went to Niger with the Chief of Defense Staff, we went to Niger with the Foreign Minister, we were also in Mali, and we were received as dollars. But we need to have that organic conversation devoid of other foreigners in the room. We need to tell us the truth, and we need to create perhaps a more resilient, a stronger, a more purpose-built, built to purpose ECOWAS that will stand the next generation. But ECOWAS text should be revisited. If we're willing to revisit our constitutions, we should rearrange the course, in my opinion.
Yeah, briefly, I just wanted to add something with regards to this ECOWAS question. When the issue of the Nigerian coup happened, how was it resolved? How did we resolve the issue of the Nigerian coup? When the Nigerians said we didn't want to speak to the ECOWAS government, we didn't want to speak to Nigeria, there was a plane that flew into to Niamey full of Islamic scholars and traditional leaders, in which the government of Nigeria had little or no choice but to accept these people. So when we are saying we need to reimagine the new ECOWAS, or we need to reimagine how to resolve the issues, these solutions are there. It's a simple question, just to look in the mirror and ask a simple question: who are we? Who are we? And if we could find a mechanism to resolve, even them receiving them was a significant success at that point. And as such, these are people that we've been able to almost relegate within the construct of the conventional constitutions that we have. So I'll stop there. We have to ask the question, who are we?
Unfortunately, we have to fast spent in terms of time. So I'll just allow Kabir to give present remark briefly, but then just head straight to launch. Then everybody can.
Yes, thank you very much, Malik. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. I most really appreciate the two panelists for joining us and everyone who have made themselves available. Indeed, the discussion has really helped to portray that we need a multifaceted approach to addressing security challenges in Nigeria. The insights from Mr. Hassan, Honorable Gebi, we really appreciate you. We appreciate everyone from the other side of the table. Indeed, we are glad to have you here. As we conclude, we just want to reiterate that at GGA Nigeria, we are committed to promoting this kind of security dialogue, strategic approaches to solving security challenges. Our director has sent his greetings. Really glad to have all of you here once again. And I think on the final note, I would just say that we're going to have a group picture, then we'll proceed for lunch. Thank you very much, everyone. It's a great time with you all. Thank you. Thank you.